Let me rant a little, because that is exactly what this review is going to be about. Directed by Niyi Akinmolayan, Colours of Fire is a Nollywood fantasy drama that opened in Nigerian cinemas on December 24th, 2025, before finally arriving on Netflix on August 7th, 2026. The film stars Osas Ighodaro, Uzor Arukwe, Aigbe, Femi Branch, Ibrahim Chatta, and Gabriel Afolayan. And honestly, this is a colossal piece of rubbish. There is a lot to unpack in this AI-assisted amateurish skit masquerading as an Afrofusion fantasy film. And I am not going to mince my words, because Colours of Fire represents something far more frustrating than simply a bad movie. It represents the increasingly disturbing willingness of parts of Nollywood to mistake technology for filmmaking, visual noise for spectacle, and an AI-generated prompt for cinematic imagination. First and foremost, Colours of Fire feels less like a fully realized feature film and more like an elaborate stage play that desperately wants to be cinema. It has the energy of watching a university theatre arts department struggle through an ambitious dramatic production. Except somebody has taken that stage production, put cameras in front of it, and then decided that throwing layers of flashy AI-generated imagery over the footage would magically transform it into a cinematic experience. It doesn't. What we get instead is a weak, irritating stage play dressed up in digital costume, desperately pretending to be an epic fantasy film. And this is where the AI becomes particularly offensive. The visual effects don't feel like an artistic tool being used to enhance the filmmaker's vision. They often feel like someone discovered an AI video generator, typed a few increasingly ridiculous prompts, pressed generate, and decided the results were good enough for the big screen. The film reeks of that AI prompt first, filmmaking second mentality. It is almost as though somebody fed a cinematic prompt into an AI system. African fantasy, mystical kingdom, epic battle, magical powers, dramatic lighting, Hollywood spectacle. And then took whatever came out of the machine and said, perfect, put it in the movie. No, it is not perfect. It is precisely the kind of filmmaking that makes people question whether Nollywood actually understands the difference between using AI as a filmmaking tool and allowing AI to become a substitute for filmmaking itself. And that distinction matters. AI can be an extraordinary tool when it is placed in the hands of filmmakers with a clear visual language, strong storytelling instincts, proper art direction, disciplined compositing, and an understanding of cinematic grammar. But when the technology becomes the entire visual strategy, you don't get innovation, you get digital garbage. Colours of Fire repeatedly feels like a TikTok AI-generated fantasy skit that somehow escaped social media, acquired a feature-length runtime, and ended up in cinemas. And that is embarrassing. Because while Nollywood is busy presenting this kind of material as Afrofusion fantasy cinema, ordinary Nigerian creators are already producing remarkably imaginative AI shots on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. They may not have the budget of a theatrical production, but many understand something fundamental that this movie seems to forget. A great image does not automatically make a great film. Cinema is not a collection of pretty pictures. It is storytelling, performance, production design, cinematography, editing, sound, pacing, visual effects, and above all, a coherent artistic vision. Throwing AI-generated spectacle at a weak foundation doesn't strengthen the foundation. It merely puts expensive wallpaper over a collapsing building. And unfortunately, Colors of Fire spends far too much time trying to convince us that it is visually grand instead of actually being visually grand. The result is a movie that feels caught between a theatrical production, a fantasy cosplay exercise, and an AI-generated social media experiment. That is the tragedy of it. Because there is nothing inherently wrong with Nollywood attempting ambitious fantasy. In fact, Nollywood desperately needs filmmakers willing to take risks outside the familiar dramas, romances, and crime stories that dominate the industry. But ambition without execution is not innovation, it is just expensive incompetence. And Colors of Fire is what happens when filmmakers seem more interested in demonstrating what technology can generate than asking whether what they generated actually belongs in a movie. This isn't how Nollywood should be embracing the future. AI should be serving the filmmaker. The filmmaker should not be serving the AI. When the technology becomes more noticeable than the storytelling, when the visual effects become more distracting than immersive, and when the audience can practically feel the prompts behind the images, the illusion is already dead. What should have been an ambitious Afrofusion fantasy instead becomes an exhausting demonstration of what happens when AI-generated spectacle is mistaken for cinematic craftsmanship. And frankly, Nollywood needs to stop embarrassing itself with productions like this. We cannot keep screaming about taking Nigerian cinema to the global stage while releasing films that look like unfinished AI experiments wearing the costume of feature films. Hollywood didn't become Hollywood because it discovered bigger cameras or more visual effects. It became an industry because generations of filmmakers understood that technology is only as powerful as the creative mind controlling it. Nollywood needs to learn that lesson. Because Colors of Fire isn't the future of African cinema. It is a warning about what happens when technology advances faster than the filmmaker's imagination. I honestly couldn't believe what I was watching. Beneath all the loud, colorful visuals, Colors of Fire is a total embarrassment to filmmaking. And I cannot stop hammering on the AI because frankly, the AI is the movie. It is impossible to watch this thing without constantly being reminded that you are looking at generated imagery rather than a carefully constructed cinematic world. AI-generated visuals appear to make up roughly 80% of what is happening on screen. And somehow, that isn't even the worst part. The worst part is how spectacularly bad they are. These aren't visuals that immerse you in the fantasy. They repeatedly pull you out of it. They look like something straight out of Temu's clearance section, where even the rejected digital merchandise somehow found its way into a feature film. There is nothing cinematic about it, nothing tactile, nothing convincing, nothing that makes you forget for even a second that you are watching computer-generated imagery. Instead, the visuals scream AI prompts at the audience over and over again. And at some point, you genuinely have to ask yourself, how on earth does Mollywood still not understand how to properly incorporate AI into filmmaking? Using AI like this is not technological innovation. It's technological laziness masquerading as cinematic ambition. And when an audience can see the AI more clearly than it can see the filmmaker's creative vision, something has gone catastrophically wrong. And please, don't even get me started on the acting. The performances are so basic, wooden, and lifeless that the entire film often feels like it is being performed at half speed. But even before placing the blame entirely on the actors, the elephant in the room is the atrocious writing. The dialogue is painfully monotone, with conversations delivered with so little rhythm, variation, or emotional texture that scenes that should carry tension instead feel like actors reading lines from a cue sheet. There is an almost mechanical quality to the dialogue. Characters speak, another character responds, and the scene moves on. But there is barely any sense that these people are actually living inside the world of the story. Fantasy filmmaking requires conviction. It requires the performers to sell the mythology, the stakes, and the culture of the world being created. Here, too often, the dialogue sounds like exposition being recited rather than characters communicating. Take Uzor Arukwe, for example. His performance is neither particularly terrible nor particularly impressive. It sits awkwardly somewhere in the middle, largely because the material gives him very little to work with. The script itself is so underwritten that even a stronger performance would have struggled to rescue some of these scenes. But there is another issue that becomes difficult to ignore: language and cultural authenticity. Arukwe is Igbo. Fine, so what? His ethnicity is not an excuse for failing to convincingly portray a Yoruba warrior in a film that requires him to inhabit that cultural identity. If the role required him to speak Yoruba, then the responsibility was on the production to prepare him properly, and on the actor to put in the work. If you cannot speak the language required for a role, train for it. Get a language coach. Research the pronunciation. Study the cadence. Learn the cultural mannerisms. Understand how the character would carry himself, speak, move, and react within that cultural setting. And if the character is supposed to be a Yoruba warrior, then don't just throw the actor into costume, hand him a weapon, and yell, "Action!" Study how Yoruba warriors are represented historically and culturally. Study the physicality, posture, movements, speech patterns, and behavioral nuances required to make the character feel authentic. Instead, Colors of Fire gives us a character who is apparently immersed in a Yoruba world. Yet Arukwe manages only 2 Yoruba words throughout the movie. Two. And somehow we are expected to accept that as cultural authenticity. This is precisely the kind of corner cutting that continues to frustrate me about Nollywood. There is often this maddening tendency to throw actors in front of a camera, put them in elaborate costumes, give them weapons, surround them with AI-generated spectacle, and assume the audience will simply swallow the whole thing because it is labeled Afrofusion fantasy. No, costumes don't create culture. AI-generated backgrounds don't create world building. And an accent doesn't create authenticity. The actor has to inhabit the character, and the production has to give that actor the preparation necessary to do it convincingly. Unfortunately, Colors of Fire too often feels like everyone involved just showed up, said their lines, hit their marks, and went home. And that brings us right back to the dialogue. When the writing is this flat, the direction this uninspired, and the performances this restrained, the actors are essentially fighting a losing battle. There is no dramatic electricity, no conversational spark, no sense of danger, no emotional escalation. Just monotone dialogue, wooden performances, and a screenplay begging for CPR. The result is a film that desperately wants to be an epic, but repeatedly reminds you that underneath all the colorful AI-generated fireworks, there isn't enough human filmmaking holding the damn thing together. But the question that keeps haunting me is, how the hell did this thing make it into cinemas? Seriously, who watched Colors of Fire during production, sat through the final cut, and thought, yes, this is ready for a theatrical release? Who signed off on this? Who looked at this cinematic disaster and decided audiences should actually pay money to experience it on a giant screen? Imagine getting dressed, driving to the cinema, handing over 15,000 naira of your hard-earned money, buying your popcorn, settling into that comfortable seat, the lights go down, and then this madness starts playing in front of you. At that point, you are not watching a fantasy film. You are watching your 15,000 naira disappear in real time. And that is the real horror of Colors of Fire. Forget the fantasy. Forget the AI-generated creatures. Forget the colorful visuals. The scariest thing about this movie is the thought of someone actually paying cinema money to watch it. The ticket price isn't just expensive. It's an admission fee to cinematic suffering. And now for my rating. Colors of Fire scores a disappointing 1 out of 10. I'm definitely trashing this. Behind the mask, we see all. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and share this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell icon for notifications. Also, be sure to follow me on TikTok, WhatsApp channel, and Instagram at Dominus Cinephile for more movie and TV series reviews. Dominus Cinephile, signing out.